Hello, this is Dr. David A. Padgett, Associate Professor of Geography and Director of the Geographic Information Sciences Lab at Tennessee State University. And this is a tutorial for environmental justice community stakeholders in community-based participatory mapping. And so by following these instructions, you should be able to collect asset mapping data or any data using GPS or smartphone GPS receivers to create maps of your community features of interest. So for asset mapping, the first thing that we should think about is what are the good land uses in our community. Instead of looking at things that might be seen as negative ordinarily, maybe such as an abandoned building or maybe even an overgrown vacant lot. The question is, what are some of the good land uses? If there are people or organizations or other facilities like playgrounds that we know have good and positive impacts upon our neighborhoods, we should be thinking, how can we replicate those land uses? Is there someplace else that we can build a playground? If there's some informal vendor that's providing fresh fruits and vegetables, how can we support others who would like to do that also? So here is an example of a vacant lot. In many cases, we can look at this vacant lot as an asset or as an eyesore. We could look at it as a property that might attract nuisances, people hanging out, maybe litter, garbage, dumping, or we can look at it as an opportunity. Maybe this could become an urban garden. Maybe it could become a playground for young people. Maybe it could become a staging area for a temporary urban market where a vendor could set up if given permission from the property owner. These are the types of things that we might see as eyesores, but we can perhaps put a more positive spin on and look at them as assets. Now, before we get involved with any technology such as geographic information systems or global positioning systems, we should just walk through our community and have people of all ages and perspectives in your community just walk through. Look at what things are good and point them out and list them, and maybe even informally write down their location. A lot of us rarely walk our neighborhoods anymore. Oftentimes we drive through without noticing a lot of the good things that are present. So the first thing that we should do is just take a community walkthrough. We're not really trying to use the equipment or the technology, just familiarizing ourselves and getting in touch with what is positive about our community as we list the assets. Also, we should designate, what kinds of assets we're looking for. Are we looking for food resources, such as urban gardens or informal markets? Are we looking at educational and job opportunities for people? Are we looking at resources for our senior citizen population? Are we looking at places where people can go for health assessments or for medical care, either in formal or informal settings? All of these things should be categorized perhaps informally during a walkthrough. Now, when we get to the actual asset mapping, I have developed this data worksheet for specifically defining different types of assets. The first column is the specific name of the asset. What is it called? What do people in the community call this place, person, or location? And so notice on this sheet we have a community center, a park, a shelter, vacant property, and so on and so forth. Now, in terms of the asset description, and I've included lots of variables or variations on what assets are. This is a more generalized description. Are we looking at minority or locally owned businesses that can provide jobs? Are there historical sites that we want to preserve? What about public transit or good quality public transit that can give our youth and elderly a chance to get out and explore the neighborhood or go to places of employment? A large chain business might, for some, be an asset because of the jobs it provides. Green space, trees are often assets. Physical activities, anchor institutions. There are many different types of assets that are inclusive of those that are on this sheet, and perhaps during your community walkthrough you might think of others. So in no way is this sheet set in stone. But in terms of the general asset descriptions, we might end up with several dozen or several hundred assets that we might want to sort once we get this into spreadsheet format, and we might sort it in a way that we might want to list all the public transit assets in our community, or what are the green space assets in our community, or where are all the urban gardens in our community. So by having a general description under that second field, we can then list and sort various specific types of assets. The next field is the address, nearest intersection, or general location. This field serves as a check on our GPS receiver data. Mistakes can be made, people can transpose numbers, you can have equipment malfunctions, and so if we know the street address of an asset, then you would write that down there. If an asset does not specifically have a street address, but it's near a major intersection, or you can locate it near that intersection. If an asset is not near an intersection or does not have an address, then you would list it as a certain distance and direction away from a fixed feature, such as a large building or a permanent structure. So for instance, the Boswell Park is would be situated north of a specific building, and so that is the way that we would go back and see if our points of our assets are in those general locations. Then we know that a mistake was not made with latitude and longitude. Now, in terms of latitude and longitude, in some cases we can use a GPS receiver. Notice that when we get latitude and longitude, whether it's using a GPS receiver or using a smartphone, you should download an app called Where Am I At? The Where Am I At app. All that app does is give you latitude and longitude, and notice that the lat long is given in decimal degrees. For our purposes, we are going to be in the northern hemisphere and the western hemisphere. So latitude is going to be a positive number, longitude is going to be a negative number. Also, we must include all of the numbers behind the decimal. If it's 5 numbers or 6 numbers, include all of them. Do not round the number off. Time is very important because there are certain times of day that it's easy for us to get satellites to lock in on the GPS receiver. If we find that a certain time of day allows us to have really good results in terms of satellite reception, that's when we should do our asset mapping. Also, this should preferably be done during the day. And so that is how to fill out the walkthrough sheet. And of course, you should have the name of individuals collecting the data. You should probably work in teams. Everybody in each team should collect data collectively, so that if one or two people make a mistake, somebody should have the correct information. Whatever equipment you're using, if it's a GPS unit, get the model name and number, brand name, and if there's a serial number, identify that so that you're sure that in the event that there's an equipment malfunction, you can trace the malfunction back to the device. And obviously the name of the person collecting the data is very important in case you have to check back with that individual and ask them, is that a 6 or a 5 that you wrote? Is that an 8 or a 9 that you wrote down? Because sometimes, as you can see, when we are handwriting information, people might not write as clearly as we would like them to. Okay, so next we take those data and enter them into an Excel spreadsheet. And so as you can see, you can abbreviate the fields as asset, then description, location, latitude, longitude. Notice latitude and longitude are with all 5 numbers past the decimal, and also longitude in the Western Hemisphere is negative, the time, and the satellite. So you save this spreadsheet after you have all your data entered as an Excel spreadsheet document. Then you will save that document as a CSV comma delimited file. Now when you save the comma delimited file, you'll get a whole lot of strange error messages. Just ignore them, just keep hitting yes and agreeing yes, and eventually you'll save the file. So after you save the file, all you have to do is hit the add button, and you will upload your CSV file into the ArcGIS Online program, as you can see here, and the program will read the latitude, longitude of your points and will pop your assets into the map as is shown in this example. You might have to play around with the program a little bit to get it to look like this, but that's one thing I would recommend, is that you simply do a couple of dry runs, as we did here in Washington, D.C., so that you get used to using the program. Don't wait until you are actually doing your formal asset mapping to try to learn the program at the same time as you're trying to figure out how to do asset mapping. Like I said, do a couple of dry runs, and then start off with a fresh map when you're ready to go in your formal asset mapping. Also, the ArcGIS Online map can be saved, and then additional points can be added later, and then you can just update the map by uploading a new spreadsheet with the additional points, and then of course deleting the layer that was there before. Or you might want to leave the layer. You might have asset map for a certain date, and then another date after that. It just all depends upon how you want to organize it. You can play around with the base map. Here is the CSED and ECHO training map from a practice run we did at Gulfport High School in Mississippi. And so if you notice, with this dry run, we use the aerial photograph as a base map instead of the street map. And so using the aerial photo, you can clearly get a better idea of what's on the ground and the features, because you actually have a photograph. And really, at the end of the day, you will want to display these data in some form for a community meeting, or for decision-making activity, or what have you. And so sometimes having the actual features in photograph form on the map makes it easier for people to recognize what's on the ground. Here's another asset map from a walkthrough that we did in Pensacola in the Wedgwood community. Now, one thing I like to point out is notice that in this map, a borrow pit was listed as an asset. I would not say that a borrow pit is an asset, and a borrow pit would be more closely related to a disamenity or locally undesirable land use, a LULU. You probably can make a separate map of things like borrow pits or toxic release inventory sites or other sites that are definitely disamenities and not assets. So it is necessary that we at times map things that we don't like in our communities or are undesirable, but you probably want to put those on a separate map so that there's no confusion between the two. Here's an example of a youth community asset mapping exercise. Now, with this exercise, we essentially did the exact same thing as we did with the outdoor asset mapping, but with these young people, we actually just had them use Google Maps to go in, zoom out, find specific assets over a larger area of their community. So in this case, these young men were really looking at larger areas than they could walk. And so in that case, you can use Google Maps to drop pins on assets and then take the latitude, longitude coordinates from Google Maps and put them in that same type of spreadsheet or the exact same spreadsheet, and even we can fill out the exact same form, paper form that we did for the outdoor GPS mapping, and then pull that spreadsheet into ArcGIS Online and have the same result. So this is if you're looking at a relatively large area that might take too long to cover by walking. You can easily do the asset mapping using Google Maps and ArcGIS Online in combination. Now, a really good tool for asset mapping is the Story Maps template in ArcGIS Online. With the Story Maps template, you can actually take photographs of each asset and then write a brief caption about that asset so that you can have a greater explanation or a better description of the asset and explain why it's an asset. And so in this case, this is a mock walkthrough that we did on campus at TSU, Tennessee State University. And so we had this boiler plan, and we presumed that there was a gentleman there named Cleavon Jones, who was the plant manager, and he is oftentimes a source of mentoring for young people in the community. And so as I've done this type of mapping for young people, in many cases the asset might not necessarily be a building or an institution, but a person at a building or in a business or at an institution. And so if you have certain assets, you can really use story maps to tell the story of exactly why you decided that particular land feature is an asset, whereas people might not immediately understand why you selected that as an asset. The Story Maps program is relatively user friendly. It's you can upload your own photographs there at assets, and then, as you can see here, write in descriptive captions. There are other online mapping tools that communities can use, such as EJ Screen. Now, the EJ Screen mapping tool provides an index of potential community exposures to a variety of environmental ills, so to speak. It can be updated with data collected during asset mapping activities in nearly the same manner that ArcGIS Online is updated. There's also the My Right to Know application, where you can type in a zip code area or an address and get an idea of what types of toxic releases are occurring in and around your community. There's ToxMap, which I helped to create, which not only tells you what is being released in your community, but also what health effects are associated with exposure. So, for example, if you're being exposed to phosphine, you might want to know, what's phosphine doing to my eyes, my lungs, my health. If I'm pregnant, should I be concerned? If I'm elderly, should I be concerned if I'm breathing in phosphine? You get that information using ToxMap. There are several other TRI data and tools produced by the Environmental Protection Agency that are very user-friendly, as you can see here. Also, there are tools such as the RETIGO Real-Time Geospatial Data Viewer, which is a EPA mapping platform to which communities can add their own data, just as in ArcGIS Online. The C-First is another tool that works very, very similar in giving stakeholders an opportunity to add data and determine various risks to exposure based upon their location. Then there's the risk screen environmental indicators, results map, and also the sea line highway pollution map, and CMAC community multi-scale air quality modeling map. These online mapping tools have tutorials that will enable users to use them effectively. They are very user-friendly once you understand how to use them via these tutorials and users guides. And here's the tutorial for EnviroFacts, another EPA site where a stakeholder can type in an address or a zip code area and get a pretty good idea of what's happening in the community in terms of a variety of environmental threats to air, water, land, etc. So if there are any questions, please contact me at tsugislab@gmail.com or give me a call at my office and I will assist you. Don't expect for this to be mastered overnight, but I'm looking forward to hearing from you and providing any assistance that you need while you're completing your community-based mapping project. Thank you very much.